Hi, everybody. My name is Brad Cruz. I am the Associate Vice President of Alumni Relations at Case Western Reserve University. Welcome to Page Turners, our online book club, where we do this in conjunction or in concert with the Think Forum, which will be coming up shortly. I think this is a great forum. I think it's great for all of us to be connected virtually. And I think it's always great to know where we are. So if you can, drop into the chat where you are right now. And if you do that, I'd just put mine in there. And we're going to get to page turners in just a second, but I thought I'd give you another announcement about another program we're doing. We will have our third annual Destination Weekend. This is when we go to a city and we celebrate our alumni, spotlight them. And we're going to do that in Los Angeles, May 1st through the 4th. If you can get to Los Angeles, we have great program. We have some great presenters, and this is all going to be focused on the entertainment industry and what the wonderful work the Case Western alums are doing. With that said, I just want to give you one housekeeping rule. If everybody can mute themselves, that would be great. That's just a great courtesy to our host and also our guest, our guest speaker. So with all that said, I am going to turn it over to Karen Kaler. So Karen, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. We're so glad to have you here. This is our third meeting, as Brad said. And for the first meeting, we had a PhD student as our expert. For the second meeting, we had a professor. For our third meeting, we have an alum, just like all of you. Cal Al-Dubai graduated from CWRU in 2016. He became the founder, CEO, and AI strategist for Pandata, an AI design and development firm with an impressive client list that solves most complex business challenges with trustworthy artificial intelligence. His company was acquired by Further in 2024, so now he works there. And his commitment to diversity and ethics is centered at the heart of his work. And I think that combination of trustworthy AI and ethics is a really great framework for our discussion today. So I'm going to turn it over to Cal.
Hi, Karen. It's really great to be here today. I'm really excited about today's topic because it's near and dear to my heart, talking about the balance between AI and humans. And so just to kind of give a little bit more about my background and my story, I started off actually in neuroscience at Case Western, and after changing my major to my parents' disappointment 7 times, found my way into the world of data science. And so I started Pandata in 2016, right around the year I graduated, at a time when I heard this question: we have data and we don't know what to do with it. And over the course of 8 years, that evolved into enterprises using machine learning and AI increasingly in the workforce. And then over the last couple of years, we've seen the unfolding of generative AI and tools like ChatGPT becoming a part of daily life. So it's been an amazing journey, and I'm really excited today to dive into Kevin's work.
Okay, well, data science, I want to ask you about that being your major. Many of you know data science. Do you remember when you first started hearing about that as a major? Tell me about that.
So it was a really interesting story. I was working in a hospital system researching public health and population health and asking questions like, what keeps a healthy population healthy? And it turns out I was dealing with a lot of messy data. I was dealing with a lot of stats and computer programming in order to answer these questions. And this is dating back to 2012, 2013, and this is when the title data scientist really first started to get popularized. Except there were no gateways into data science. You just had to say, I am doing data science, therefore I am. And so when Bob Herbold, one of our alumni, who was the former COO of Microsoft, announced that he was endowing the data science program, that caught my attention in 2014. This was after a few more major changes. And I remember calling my dad and saying, Dad, I'm going to change my major one more time. This is the one. And so I was able to work with the Dean of Undergraduate Studies and the departments of computer science and mathematics to create a dean's approved major in data science, and a lot of my coursework transferred over. I had to do a few more classes, and that's how I ultimately graduated and became the first data science graduate here.
Okay, and if any of you out there have students, university students right now, if you're parents, this should give you great heart. I mean, Cal is been selected like a 40 under 40 in Cleveland. Cal is doing really well, and this was your 7th major?
Yes, this was the one that I decided to end on.
This is the one. Okay. So, well, now let's go. As you know, we're speaking today in anticipation of the Think Forum on March 20th with Kevin Roose, and we're discussing Futureproof. I'm going to tell you just a little about Kevin's background. He grew up in a liberal household in Oberlin, Ohio. And then he was a sophomore at Brown University, and he went with one of his professors to Jerry Falwell's 20,000 member megachurch in Virginia on a writing assignment. So at the time, this was like 2006, and you may remember how Jerry Falwell was pretty big in the news back then. For one of the things he said that 9/11, let's see, was, here we go, was the result of feminists, homosexuals, abortionists, and the ACLU, among others. He was sort of like the original blame it on DEI guy. So he goes to this mega church, and Kevin is a student, and he meets other students there at this evangelical church. And he was like, do you come here much? You go here often? And they were like, well, we come every week. We go to Liberty. And he says, I wasn't sure whether go to Liberty was some sort of coded religious language like walk the path or seek the kingdom. So I asked and had to chuckle when they told me that Liberty meant Liberty University, a Christian liberal arts college founded and presided over by Reverend Falwell. I mean, come on, a liberal arts college run by Jerry Falwell? How about an etiquette workshop run by Courtney Love? So he said that he really had trouble talking with them. There was this huge cultural divide, and he was really fascinated by this God divide that he had been hearing about, and he decided to go do a sort of study abroad at Liberty University for a semester and to write a book about it. And he was very earnest. He really immersed himself in the culture. He went trying to save souls on spring break in Fort Lauderdale, and he wrote this fabulous book, The Unlikely Disciple. This was published while he was still, he was a senior at Brown. So then, of course, he had this on his resume. He did become a journalist. He was doing a lot of work with very prominent, outlets. And around this time, right after he graduated, we were really feeling the effects of the financial crisis. So, and the financial collapse of 2008, and he decided to go sort of undercover again. And he, his second book, published in 2014, he shadowed 8 new Wall Street banking recruits after the crash of 2008 to research this. And he writes, it's becoming a young Wall Street banker is like pledging the world's most lucrative and soul-crushing fraternity. So really inside look here. Now, the undercover journalism, we're going to see the part that was a little like that in Futureproof that I think sort of was inspirational to him. He writes about going to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Now that's shorthand, often just called Davos. He said it's supposed to be high-minded, let's talk about how to make the world better. But he found it to be like a Coachella of capitalism, a beyond satire boondoggle where all these prominent people sit around chatting about income inequality while eating $37 sandwiches. He said at night, they took off their humanitarian mask and are talking all about profit. This digital transformation, which they hope would save them, they hoped that it would save them millions of dollars by shrinking their reliance on human workers. He says, in other words, when the cameras and the microphones were off, these executives weren't talking about helping workers. They were fantasizing about how to get rid of them completely. And this seems to be sort of the inspiration for this book. These 9 rules for humans in the age of automation. How can we survive and thrive? So that was his goal. And Cal, how do you think he did on that goal?
I really found the book fascinating, especially because it was written at a snapshot in time before a few major events unfolded. And there's a kind of prescience to the book. It was written, and I read the updated paperback edition just after GPT-3 had come on the map, but before ChatGPT became the popular tool that it was and rose to 100 million users in less than 2 months. And so the book is really interesting. It's talking about a lot of the valid trends about automation increasingly taking over and disrupting certain facets of work. And about the elements that make humans evergreen. And then ChatGPT came in, and it challenges quite a bit of the book, but a lot of it holds true. And I've been reading another book in parallel, Super Agency by Reid Hoffman, which was just published earlier this year. And reading these 2 books in parallel is really interesting. Super Agency's core thesis is the only way through the discomfort is to accelerate faster. More AI, more investment, more automation everywhere. And Kevin comes at this from a slightly different angle, saying what we're rushing to automate what and for what purpose and how is that impacting individuals. So it was really interesting reading these 2 books side by side.
Yeah, oh yeah, when you talk about the speed of change, Kevin comes at it from a point of talking about the Industrial Revolution and how during the Industrial Revolution, of course, some people became fabulously wealthy, but it created brutal conditions and horrendous exploitation of many workers just to provide that big difference in wealth. So what Kevin advises us to do is to strengthen our uniquely human skills to better equip us to do what machines cannot. And Cal, I know you have written about tech yourself. Cal has been published in Forbes, VentureBeat, NASDAQ. I mean, so how do you think he did with the book?
So I love the principles. The 9 principles are very evergreen in nature. And I think he hits the nail on the head. And part of my own take on all of this is that, yes, we're increasingly introducing automation and able to remove the toil from certain lines of work, but that doesn't come for free. We don't just introduce automation and then magic happens. We actually need to reintroduce the human element. And I see a lot of AI projects fail because they're not taking into consideration enough of how much human element is needed to make AI succeed. Now, does the job look the same way? No. Do humans get removed entirely from it? Also, no. And so there's this new balance that requires a lot of thoughtfulness. And the principles that Kevin highlights here about what remains uniquely human are spot on. Introducing elements of creativity and surprise and finding ways to leave a thumbprint. A lot of really, really great principles.
Yeah. So now, some of you submitted questions ahead of time. We're going to go to our questions, and then if we have time at the end, we'll open it up for more questions. But let's start first with John Diamond. John submitted 2 questions, and let's start with just your first question. We'll go to the second one later, but I think your first question really gets to the heart of the book. So, John?
Hi, yeah, this is John. So I'm going to ask this question a little bit from a slightly challenging the perspective of the human element remaining. Given that artificial superintelligence will eventually, and this could take decades, so we're not talking about where we are now or even a decade from now, be economically more efficient at all jobs. And if you're not convinced by that, then look at the YouTube video, Humans Need Not Apply, which is posted by CGP Gray, I believe. leaving only a small fraction of jobs where human interaction is specifically paid for at a premium, how would people be able to meet their financial needs when there are orders of magnitude fewer employment options than prospective employees? Presumably, universal basic income would be a part of that solution, but in experiments, it's shown mixed results. So it's not necessarily a clear-cut, complete solution there.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
we had a second question that was, can AI substitute for all the labor jobs in the future? So how will people make money? And, I want to, Kevin Roose points out, it's not just the labor jobs. There are a lot of white collar jobs. I mean, really more now white collar jobs that would be replaced. He says we shouldn't worry about the technology. We should worry about the humans that are designing and implementing the new technology and looking to make great wealth from it. John, you mentioned universal basic income, and Kevin Roose does mention that in his Rule 7, build big nets and small webs. He says that the plan of universal basic income and also Medicare for all could be very helpful, but he wrote that in 2021, and this is not in 2025. So I don't know if we've got the political will, but Cal, we've discussed this. That really, the book addresses in this question the skills that humans should look to cultivate to differentiate themselves in an AI-driven world. So could you talk about that?
For sure. And so, I mean, this notion of at some point this technology is going to be so intelligent it's going to outsmart us. I want to challenge what we define as intelligence, right? Is intelligence when a dog reacts to a command to beg for treats? Is intelligence when we solve a math problem or when we know how to use a specific tool? What's better at math than humans? A fancy calculator. Mm-hmm. And so I think some of our definitions are off. As this technology gets more compelling and more advanced, the humans wielding that technology also become more compelling and more advanced. It's really hard to predict any more than 5 years out into the future, let alone decades. And so without speculating too much about what artificial or general artificial intelligence could look like and artificial superintelligence could look like, I'm convinced of a few things. One, humans using these tools are still going to be in demand. The nature of the problems that we're able to solve are going to shift in scale. Two, we're actually at a shrinking population curve. In fact, we're in the next decade or two expected to enter a situation where instead of having two dependents for every instead of having one dependent for every two working adults in the workforce, so a third of the population are either retired or children, it's going to be the other way around, especially as we have our lifespans increasing. And so our available workforce is actually shrinking. This is a counter trend. We're not going to have enough people. In fact, in many situations where I work in, like healthcare, we talk about this in context of nursing. Oh, yeah. Some of the automation technology, it's not to make it so that we get rid of nurses. It's so that they can effectively manage the caseloads of the patients they already have without having unintended consequences due to not being able to cover all those patients effectively. Yeah. So, that's another facet to consider here. And I don't know that we've solved all the problems there are to solve. There are a number of infectious diseases. We have sustainability issues. We have so there's a lot of problems left to solve with this technology. And then lastly, the things that are going to be in demand will change. We saw this in the pandemic. We went from a world that was increasingly interested in digital to today, there's a premium on in-person live entertainment. Yeah. And so as it becomes cheaper and cheaper to produce digital entertainment on the fly, I think we're going to see more demand, heightened demand for things that are genuine and unique and craftsman-like that AI simply can't create.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As you mentioned the pandemic, one thing I thought was a really positive outcome from the pandemic is I used to hear people talk about you can do everything online now. You can have classes online. There is no need for brick and mortar universities because we can just do it all online. We tried that experiment. Nobody thought it was as good. Nobody says that anymore. We need that uniquely human experience of being together and growing and learning from each other, and the extracurricular activities that are hallmarks of the American education system. So yes, so we did do that little test. So now, John, you had another question.
Yes, thanks. So my next question is, again, not talking about 5 or 10 years, but more decades down the road. How will humans survive and thrive after creating an artificial intelligence that could be far greater than our own, specifically artificial superintelligence, in the next few decades? There's no precedent for a lesser intelligent species remaining dominant over or even equal to a higher intelligent species. Are we essentially creating our own replacements?
Okay, so, I asked Dustin Tyler about this. Dr. Dustin Tyler is the director of the Human Fusion Lab at Case Western Reserve. He is involved in this cutting-edge research of restoring the sense of touch to missing limbs, so through artificial limbs. And you may have seen him on this 60-minute segment. If you haven't, it's fascinating, and we're going to post that in the chat so you'll have a chance later to watch that. He pointed out that AI is not an intelligent species, but rather a tool designed by humans. And he said that the humans' use of tools has become a more symbiotic relationship, but the tools are not species. So, Cal, can you speak to that?
So I couldn't agree more with that perspective. I don't know that we're creating this new separate species that's going to evolve on its own. I do, however, think that we're reaching a point in history where human evolution is going to continue digitally, especially as we talk about the advancements of some of the innovations like wearables, embedded technology, replacement limbs. We're going to become increasingly fused with our technology. And without speculating too much about what that does to our own intellectual processing or our own capacity, I can only see us continuing to co-evolve with the use of these tools that are more integrated in day-to-day work. Now, does that create issues like classes of individuals who have access to this technology and classes of individuals who don't? Absolutely. But I don't see this as us creating what's replacing us. We're continuing to evolve in a new direction.
Oh, that's terrific. Now let's go to another question. That was very hopeful, wasn't it? Yeah, besides fascinating. Elizabeth Wadsworth, are you there with another question?
I am. Hi, good morning. Hi, Cal. How are you?
Good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning. So thanks for taking my question. My question is, how will we know what we deem are our best uniquely human qualities? And do you see academia and its contributions and research leading the way to determine these parameters, or someone else? And how does the speed at which this research is produced impact or shape our future? And are the current methods and structures fast enough?
So this is a great question. And I remember reading an article 2 years ago. So this was just at the dawn of generative AI revolution. And this article was saying that the average half-life of skills in tech were 3 to 5 years. And so, or the average half-life was 3 to 5 years, and there's even less in tech-focused jobs. Yeah. And so by the time you go through a 4-year program, the skills that you've learned have reached half of their utility. And it's really challenging what it means to create a foundation for learning. If there's one thing I'm convinced by, one of the most valuable abilities that can be instilled by a 4-year institution is the ability to learn and the ability to relearn and turn that into a muscle. That is absolutely something that I'm seeing unfold in today's workforce. And as the pace of technology evolves, one of the most valuable skills that's going to help individuals stand out is the ability to recognize there's this new tool, it's adapting in this new way, and maybe I need to reconsider this process or how I approach this process. And I need to go find some micro learning that I can study over a week, in 30-minute segments, over 4 weeks in 30-minute segments, so that I can get up to speed. And there's a really interesting counter trend here as far as like workplaces adapting these new tools. And what I see, and there's a great HBR article I read recently about enterprises and organizations are great at adding new process. We find new ways to solve problems, and we say, we're going to do this new thing, and we're going to get this new tool. What we're really bad at doing is deleting. We're really bad at looking at processes, like we have this 10-step process to complete projects, and we're really bad at saying, maybe this is no longer serving us. And so just as important as it is to learn and adapt to new tools and add new things, I think it's going to be increasingly important for us to stop and figure out what to delete from our lives as a result.
Do you know what? One of my husband's things he says a lot is, we got to stop doing stupid things. Right?
Well, and so this comes out all the time. So there's just one situation where we've rolled out this AI system that can summarize content and create bullet point system responses to emails that nobody was reading anyway. So why are we summarizing it?
Right. Yes. Huh. So these uniquely human things. One of the things that Kevin Roose wrote about his rule number 8 is learn machine age humanities, and I think that's what we need to think about. Another question was what should we teach our children as well as our college students? But I'm just going to read you some of his bullet list, but it's fascinating. Attention guarding. He says guarding, not focus, because really we have to fight distractions to learn to focus. We've got a lot of distractions in the world. Room reading, learning to understand others and where they're coming from. Resting, really get enough rest and having the right to disconnect. This is, I think, a huge one. Digital discernment. Debunking misinformation. I mean, that is a tool we all need to learn. There's so much information out there, and a goodly portion is not correct. Analog ethics, how to behave in pro-social ways, like learned in kindergarten, developing positivity, empathy, and the ability to regulate one's own emotions is going to be key. And consequentialism, causes have effects.
Sure.
So anything.
It's one of the things that struck me about how you described this is one passage in particular where we've tried to make humans more like machines, and that doesn't work. We're not machine-like. In fact, we are at our highest performance when we rest, when we allow our minds to wander, when we process our thoughts. And so I don't know if anybody has the recipe yet, but I can guarantee you that success in the age of AI isn't going to look more like making us like machines. It's going to look the other way. More creative, more critical, more introspective.
Boy, I think that's a great quote. You can go back and watch this later and maybe write that down, put it on your wall. That was great. Okay. So our next question is from Christine Ticknor. Christine, are you ready?
Hey, Karen, I think maybe you asked the question Christine submitted. Maybe, I think maybe just for the sake of time.
Yes. Christine's question is, my healthcare provider will begin using AI to capture doctor appointments and document them. I feel this may interfere with the doctor-patient relationship. What do you think? Now, my thoughts about that is about 30 years ago, I remember taking my son to a doctor, and the doctor used a dictaphone to talk about everything he was talking about in the room. I mean, he's relaying information so he doesn't have to write it all down. I thought, well, okay, that was okay. But then, maybe it was like 18 years ago, I had just moved to New York and I went to a new doctor. She walked in to the waiting room. I'm sitting on the table. She walks in, sits down at the computer, and she reads my chart and types things and asks me questions. And I remember thinking literally, why did I bring my body in? Because she didn't turn to look at me, right? Until eventually I had a very brief encounter between my body and her, but it was mostly she's reading the chart. I mean, I worked in volunteered for years in a NICU, and the nurses had to spend so much time charting. I got to hold the tiny babies. They said, I wish I had time to just sit and hold a baby, because there's so much of the medical charting to do. Now, at my most recent doctor's appointment, there was a sign on the wall that said a medical scribe would be hearing this and would be doing the charting. And I had the doctor's full attention. So I could talk to her, and I thought it worked really well. And I thought I might have liked AI listening in better than the human. But do you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I just had a recent encounter. I had some breathing issues that I'm dealing with. And so got a specialist appointment. I had less than 15 minutes with the provider, and I think that was generous. I sat down in the room the whole time. She was typing while looking at the screen and asking me questions. The only time she looked at me was when she stuck a tube up my nose, and then back to the computer she went. And then I got a bill, and the price of the room was more expensive than the cost of interacting with the doctor. So there's a lot of issues that are challenged with our healthcare system, but the introduction of technology, specifically for documenting patient cases, has only distanced providers from patients. I'm hopeful that in a new world where technology has sufficiently advanced, there's still some challenges with it, not only does it make that interaction more human, but it can make it more continuous. Yeah. A provider might then be able to continue that interaction by having an AI-based assistant checking in with you on a regular basis and asking you questions and interpreting results, and proactively letting your provider know when to reach out to you. That is not something that we can do today. That's a version of healthcare we can't even comprehend with today's health system. Yeah. And so if we get it right, and there's the big emphasis on if we get it right, I think it can actually make the patient-provider interaction much more human.
You know, we have two more medical questions. One is, how can AI help the medical industry to aid in avoiding and decreasing misdiagnosis and serving the underserved? Is the person who asked this out there? Okay, well, I'm going to go on. But by educating school-aged children in prevention of diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, and inflammation. And someone else says, ask about the trust issues regarding information, particularly for academic legitimacy and healthcare research. So, Kat, do you want to start with that?
So I think there's two different questions here. There's the question of, can we trust AI to help us with our healthcare? And the answer to that is yes, if we trust the humans behind it. There are a lot of known issues with unintended consequences of using AI in sensitive situations. Healthcare is very near and dear to my heart. Over the past few years, we've seen examples of readmissions algorithms selecting for white patients over patients of color because these models were trained to look at cost as an indicator of degree of sickness. And it turns out if you're from an underrepresented community or from a cultural background that doesn't seek healthcare in a hospital as often, that your data shows up differently. When it comes to AI being used in radiology, a vast majority of imaging data sets come from predominantly white male captured images, just because the way in which individuals were selected for these trials came from certain pools of people. And it turns out that the models themselves, they're not racist, but they learn patterns that humans can't see that actually correlate with factors that are indicative of ethnicity and race and gender. And so this can create algorithms that perform really well in one subset and not so well in a minority or an underrepresented subset. So to address that portion, yes, AI can in fact make care more personalized, more effective. if we trust the humans designing these systems to collect representative data and implement appropriate guardrails around that technology.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, the bias that's built in, the bias from having data sets that are not diverse enough. I mean, really, when we talk about diversity, it wasn't that long ago that they only used male lab rats, only males, because they were easier to work with. And then we didn't know how health things presented in women. Half the population was being ignored by the data sets, because we've got to think about that. We had, just so our students would be prepared for this information, 2 years ago, our common reading book was Ruha Benjamin's Race After Technology, about how this plays in and how we train our machines to have bias. Kevin Roose talks about that. Page 151, in case you want to read it particularly. He also, though, writes about in 2018, a Chinese tech company built a deep learning algorithm that diagnosed brain cancer and other diseases faster and more accurately than a team of 15 top doctors. He found that the same year, American researchers developed an algorithm capable of identifying malignant tumors on CT scans with an error rate 20 times lower than a human radiologist. Any thoughts?
So, you know what's better than a tired radiologist is an algorithm that doesn't get sleepy.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the caseloads of medical professionals is insanely high, and they don't have the time.
Yeah.
I find a lot of these studies, while interesting, not actually reflective of the way in which we desire to use the technology. So instead of saying, is the AI better than a human? It's how do we integrate these two together so that we get the best of all worlds? Instead of it being, we're going to use only AI, maybe AI does the first pass. Maybe AI goes through a stack of cases and says, here are ones that definitely have a tumor. Here are ones that are anomalous and could use further review. And here are the ones that we definitely don't think have anything that a human then audits every once in a while. But it rearranges the workflow of a radiologist so that they're not going image, 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 image. They're actually working on the ones that deeply needs their expertise.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, while they're working through that image, there are markers, there's indicators, there's parts of the image that are highlighted by an algorithm that help them focus their attention. There was an interesting study that came out last year that the world was up in arms about. It was showing that not only, so it was looking at doctors and their ability to diagnose versus AI. And they had three groups, AI only, doctors using the AI, and then doctors alone. And the AI only was better than doctors plus AI and better than doctors. And so everyone was like, whoa, this is the moment. It turns out the information that the algorithm needed in order to perform the diagnosis could only be captured by a trained physician who knew what questions to ask to gather that information up front. And so, yes, the algorithm, once provided with the right information and the right questions, was better.
Yes, but the tool couldn't do it by itself.
Exactly. And so there's a lot of these instances where we talk about the algorithms are better. Well, what if? Fine. Well, how do we integrate that into human workflow to be even better and more fault tolerant?
Yeah. Oh, that's excellent. Well, so we have questions about medical education. I just want to mention here a technological advance that I just love, that through HoloLens at Case Western Reserve University, medical students and undergraduates as well can see a human hologram of a full-size body and actually see organs in detail and from different angles that you can't even see in surgery. We're already doing that right now. I mean, I've walked through one of these bodies and not gory at all either. So it's really cool. But we had a question about nursing education. Is Susan Garbett available to ask the question?
She is on. Susan, yeah.
Hi, this is Susan. So I am a DNP graduate from Case Western 2007 alumni, and I've been a nurse educator for a number of years. And so I also am somewhat familiar and comfortable with AI, but I look at nursing education and I look at AI, and it's just going to be a brave new world, because I'm convinced that as we continue to educate our nurses, we are going to need to have them understand the appropriate use of AI and how helpful it can be in terms of working with our clients. Interestingly, I was at a Florida Nursing Symposium meeting in Gainesville on Friday, and the dean of the College of Nursing, Dean Henderson, quoted one of her faculty who said that nurses will never be replaced by AI, but that, quite honestly, nurses who do not know about AI could be replaced. And I hope I made that quote somewhat accurate. So it was an interesting perspective. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts?
Well, the first thing is that, I mean, through the book, Kevin's book, we hear a lot about how nursing is pretty much the safest job there is, right? I mean, we really need nurses. But from your question, I don't know about how nursing AI education in nurse education. So I used my phone a friend, and I emailed our nursing dean, Carol Musel, and asked her for a response. She said students, how we can use AI, she said students can use AI to get a quick background on any subject. AI can create course and topical outlines and identify critical cutting-edge questions that need to be studied. AI is used to develop clinical simulations and virtual reality experiences for student learners. AI can provide tailored or personalized supplemental learning and assessments for high-stakes tests, such as board exams and certifications. So this tailored and personalized, like if AI can figure out what part of this do you not understand deeply so you can study it more. AI is used for clinical decision support, especially for advanced practice nurses and MDs and PAs. And Carol says the possibilities are endless. Anything you want to add, Cal?
So I'll react to the specific learning examples, but more broadly, AI literacy is becoming a cornerstone skill of every profession. I've heard versions of that quote that are, AI won't replace humans, but humans that use AI will replace the humans that don't. And so AI literacy means understanding what the technology is, when you can trust it, when you can rely on it, how to prompt it more effectively, knowing when it's more likely to be successful and less successful, and which tools are suitable for which tasks. That is absolutely a skill that needs to be cultivated. But as far as using AI to help with learning, I've heard some great use cases that I've come across, specifically in the healthcare field. One that I liked was creating more simulated difficult conversations. It's actually really, really difficult for providers. The very first time they have to tell a child or a parent or a family member about the cancer case of a patient, and how many times do you actually get to practice the right words? Well, guess what? AI can be a great emulating environment that emulates empathy, that emulates difficult questions, that can be used in training. It can train individuals who work on suicide prevention lines, many of which get the theoretical training but are exposed to a difficult conversation the very first time when they're handling it live. It can help with certifications. I recently completed a professional certification in AI governance, one of the first of its kind. Very in-depth content. It covered case law, and it covered the engineering, which I was more comfortable with. It covered policy and cyber controls and emerging laws and regulations around the world from different countries. This was hard to prepare for, and I was actually able to take a class in person. I was then able to take the course content, upload it to ChatGPT, and have it generate a limitless number of test questions that helped personalize the way in which I was able to prepare for this exam. I was able to say, oh, I'm not so good at these questions. Give me more questions like it. And so it took my standard model of learning, and then it met me where I needed to spend more time working. So there's a lot that we can learn about ways in which it doesn't compete with traditional education, but makes it better.
Yeah. That's great. Let's move on to our next. I think we're getting a little short on time. So, Shay Singh, can you ask our next question?
Hi, yeah. Thanks for taking my question. I don't have it in front of me. I'm running to work, but class of 2009 from econ and arts and sciences. But it was related to climate change. We know when a hurricane like the one that Helen that went through North Carolina can literally take out IV production for the most simple kind of healthcare need of saline solution, that we're dealing with new limits and very real and pressing limits of our carbon budgets. And so it also relates to the mention of needing to build bigger safety nets and knowing that those are being taken away right now. I just am curious what you think the kind of implications are for AI, and how do we make sure we're not just using it for reading those unread emails versus useful things in the face of climate change?
This is a fascinating question that I hadn't really thought about that much until I had talked to Shannon French recently. She is a CWRU professor of philosophy and law and is the director of the Ina Mori Center for Ethics at the university. And our campus, by the way, has the only master's degree in military ethics in the country. But Shannon said, people ask her all the time, how do we solve these ethical problems? Do we need to create a whole new set of ethics for AI? And she said, no, we really don't. How our core beliefs and our ethical concerns, our tools are the same, being true to our long-term values. But the question of climate change and AI, she said, young students seem more cognizant of that than the people who think let's just try ChatGPT and ask a million questions, and because it's fun, and it is fun. But she said that she's heard two students talking, and one was saying oh yeah, I had to use 5 different questions to get it to give me a good response. And the other student said, was that worth boiling a lake? So Cal, what do you think about the environmental impacts of AI?
So right now there's a couple of things. One, we don't have enough energy in the grid, let alone enough renewable energy in the grid to sustain the current rate of consumption and growth and interest, specifically in these generative AI-based solutions and tools. Typically, the incentive for corporations to reduce consumption is cost. Today, a lot of this cost is being subsidized by the big providers. So when you think of the hyperscalers like Amazon, Google, Meta, when you think about well-funded private companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, the amount of value collectively being created by these companies in generative AI is less than the total cost on the energy it takes to train and deliver and serve these models. And that's all being subsidized the consumption of it is being subsidized. I read this article last year, that's the $600 billion gap. Talks about this.
Yeah.
And it's being subsidized in the interest and the hope that over the next 2 years, the technology will advance to a point where it costs a fraction of the total consumption today, in the hope that it creates enough value that allows us to then more efficiently optimize and use AI to create more sustainable grids, more sustainable consumption. I am not so optimistic that we will self-regulate around that. However, I am optimistic that we can't continue to subsidize. The market cannot handle subsidizing these losses over a sustained period of time. Mm-hmm. And so the cost to using these tools is gradually going to go up.
Right.
Even as we have effects of reducing the total costs of serving up these models And I think that that's going to force corporations to really ask the question, is it truly more effective to use AI for this problem, or does this need to be human-led today? Are we swapping out the cost of a headcount for a cost of a machine that's costing just as much for an equal or worse or marginally better result? And so there's going to be a lot more scrutiny on that. And today in enterprises, the total spend on Gen AI is still a very small fraction. As this becomes a bigger part of budget, I trust in the markets to self-orient around this and start to really scrutinize where and when AI is being used.
Yeah. We had a little zinger of a question. How has AI impacted the current government takeover by the head of DOGE? So this book was published in 2021. So I looked for what it might say about that, and it says that here on page 153, even people who believe in AI's potential, like Tesla CEO Elon Musk, y'all might have heard of him. He said he has spoken about the perils of giving automated systems too much authority. So in 2018, they were having a lot of trouble with their automated systems, and they had to stop the automation and bring in people. And he famously tweeted, "Excessive automation at Tesla was a mistake. Humans are underrated." What do you think about the...
Elon Musk changes his opinion on a dime. He said self-driving cars were going to be here 2 years ago. And then he walked that back recently. Fully self-driving cars.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got the...
Yeah, oh yeah. No,
and then he walked that back recently. He was like, oh yeah, this is going to be a few more years. And so he's famous for, his style is, say it's coming, push aggressively for it, work everybody in his enterprises to the bone in the name of progress, and then walk it back, but we're still left with technology that's moderately more useful than what we had before. So we do, in fact, have pseudo self-driving cars. You can use self-driving on the highway. Is it going to take you from your parking lot to your school's parking lot? Probably not. Probably not in the next 5 years. So when it comes to what's happening today, by the way, the total cost cutting that has happened in the government as a result of DOGE is still a very small fraction of the total overall budget. We're talking single-digit percentages. And so while devastating, it's a lot more noise than what's really happening. That being said, some of these departments that are losing headcount are increasingly looking to supplement the loss of the headcount with automation. So I actually have a few friends who run startups who sell into the government. And some of the divisions that were buying from them that had their dollars and budgets slashed were no longer able to renew contracts, but there were other parts of the government who now, due to limited headcount, actually are in higher need of some of these solutions to supplement their existing workforce, to keep their existing workforce from burning out. So it's creating a very interesting effect, and the net result is it's actually accelerating the adoption of automation.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Fascinating. Oh,
Hey, Karen, I just wanted to let you know we are about 5 minutes from finishing. So
okay. So we're going to ask Anita Zaremba to ask her last question.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Cal. This has been a really fun discussion. I'm a trained neurobiologist, and so I will agree that sleep is one of the most important things that you need all the time. So if you have to give something up, don't give up sleep. Your brain health depends on it. So my question for you, I am working in foundation relations, and I write grant proposals, and I match grants with funders to help, the university bring in more research dollars. And so I can see, in the landscape, there are people who are adopters and people who are not adopters. And I'm always curious about what things can do. So I've been playing with Copilot and some other things just to see how to jazz up the work I'm doing and see if it can help me be more creative sometimes. And so my question for you is, what are some positive ways we can help each other move through the transition with the least amount of stress and the strongest sense of curiosity and engagement when incorporating AI functionality into our daily work stream?
I absolutely love this question. And I had one of my friends share some advice with me, and I'm going to start with that advice. And she said, in order to become effective with AI, you need to start playing with it until it impresses you. And then you play with it some more until it disappoints you. And then that's when you start to learn the edges of where it's useful and where it's not so useful. And that's when you really start getting into mastery. But when I've actually done a lot of training for enterprises where I've had people in the room, an entire workshop in a department, and we'll go through these ideation sessions. Let's identify what are all the tasks where AI can add value. And we'll have two people in the same role that are handling the same tasks, and somebody will say, hey, I tried to use AI for this task and it just wasn't good. And another person in that same role will say, I'm actually using it all the time to automate this process. And then you dig into, well, why did that work? Well, it turns out the second individual where it was successful, they learned how to prompt it in the right way, how to provide it with the right information, how to reformulate the problem. And then getting that lesson learned and sharing across an enterprise is a really great way to build a list of recipes, a list of best practices. And so this is really about encouraging that experimentation and knowledge sharing in the enterprise. And one last thing that I'd like to bring up on this, there's a great HBR article that's titled, or maybe it's an MIT Tech Review, one of them. It's titled, Don't Let AI Ruin Your Creativity. And so it was a study done on business students, and they were given the option to ideate with AI or ideate on their own. And it was found that if they started with the AI, while on average results were improved for the worst performers, the total average performance actually on creativity decreased. However, if the process started human-led and they expanded their opportunity space, they expanded their ideation space and set a direction, then used AI to then expand their creativity further and refine their work, they outperformed either group. And so what I took from that is there's some conventional wisdom into how we integrate human creativity in and around these tools to make our use of these tools effective. You don't just throw something over the wall and say, all right, go write my grant proposal for me. Yeah. So it's a lot of relearning how to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I'm going to give Kevin Roose the final answer to a question where he talks about the adjacent possible and the gradual incremental steps we're going to need. And he says, robots are not going to be performing all human labor, but machine intelligence can be used to reduce carbon emissions, find cures for rare diseases, improve government services for low-income families. And despite all our worries, AI and automation could be unbelievably good for humankind if we do it right. A world filled with AI could be filled with human creativity, meaningful work, and strong communities. And it's worth reminding ourselves, historically, technological shocks have been followed by social progress, even if it's taken a while. So Cal Aldebai, I want to thank you so much for being here. I'm going to ask you to all, before we end, you should go to the links, the chat, and see if there's some links, because you need to sign up for Kevin Roose on March 20th. It will be live streamed. You have to go. If you can't, if you're out of town, if you're in town, please come join us. If you're out of town, click and click and click like you're going, and then you'll get to the part that says, I'm going virtually. So you can do that through the same link, because you really want to do that. Any last words, Cal?
This has been incredible. Thank you for the incredible questions, the great conversation, some parting thoughts. I think we've got a long road ahead of us with AI, and it's going to take a lot of very intentional effort from all of us in learning how to work successfully with the tool and how to make sure that we're directing this technology in a way that benefits humans.
Thank you all for joining us. And next time we don't have a date yet, but this will be our next Think Forum. So ways to stay true, in case you want to read ahead. So
Love it. Thank you, everyone.
bye. Thank you.